Hello, my name is Peyton Moore, and I'm a care coordinator with the ALS Association of Oregon and Southwest Washington. Today, we are hosting another live educational series event with the purpose of sharing information and strategies for preserving the independence and quality of life of both people living with ALS and their support team. This week is our annual Family Fun Week, where we bring attention and awareness to the young people who are impacted by ALS. Today, we're going to talk with one family and how they support their children through their journey with ALS. Before we start, just a few housekeeping items. Today's live stream will be recorded for later viewing on your YouTube page and website, and our website, so you can check that out. And there should be a link for that. Feel free to ask questions of Amber and Jonathan in the Facebook comments bar, and we will do our best to answer your questions live. If you are viewing on our website, please submit questions to info@alsoregon.org. Without further ado, I'd love to introduce our speakers, Jonathan and Amber Jenson. Jonathan and Amber live in Grants Pass, Oregon, and are raising 7 children between the ages of 3 and 16. Jonathan and Amber, thank you so much for joining me today. To start, thank you. I'm so happy to have you here. I wanted to start by having you tell us a little bit about your family when Jonathan was diagnosed with ALS and how you both and your children reacted to the news at the time.
Okay, so like you said, we have 7 kiddos, and I actually was going to show you a picture of them, maybe.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Oh.
This is the 7 of them. This was the morning Jonathan went in to get his trach placed. So as you can see, we are a rowdy crowd.
That's a beautiful picture. Thank you for sharing that.
That's the tribe that we call them. We call them the Jenson tribe. 7 kiddos and totally normal. We're as normal as they come. Jonathan was diagnosed 4 years ago. It actually, what day is it? Yeah, like on the nose. He was water skiing and started to notice that he had some weakness in one of his hands, and he was no longer able to grip the rope that he was water skiing with. So that was kind of our very first clue that something wasn't quite right. Mm-hmm. So he had symptoms starting August 4 years ago, but then it took until December for diagnosis. So do you want to share? Jonathan has a few things he's typed up. So Jonathan, just for anyone that doesn't know, I should turn this so you can see. He uses eye gaze right here. So this is a eye gaze bar. He types with his eyes because with the trach, he can no longer speak. So he has no verbal communication. Everything he does is communication via this little eye gaze bar here and his computer screen. But he's pre-typed a few things because it takes him a little while to henpeck every single letter. So this is a few of his thoughts on that question, Peyton.
I was diagnosed in early December, so we waited until the holidays were over before breaking the news to the kids. They 12 to 18 months, with one about to be born. I don't think any of them fully understood what the future would hold, but they understood that life would be different. Mm-hmm. Once understood that Dad and that was hard for them, especially for our second son, but we resolved to continue living the best being of the kids.
So he was diagnosed December 9th. And we decided to wait until after Christmas because we had a trip planned to go to snow and have fun. And so we went and we had a super great time. And then it was shortly after Christmas that we explained to them that Jonathan had been diagnosed. They knew that time that he was changing because he had lost strength in his hands. So they, at that point, were opening things for him. They were helping him because he couldn't use his hands. And so they knew something was wrong. I mean, they were very aware, but none of us had any idea. But at that point, they were starting to assist him in certain tasks because it was hard for him to do certain things.
Right. And thank you, Jonathan. I think I got most of that. I had a little bit of technical difficulty over on this side, the Zoom fun, but and so I missed a little bit about you were explaining their reaction.
So when Jonathan was diagnosed, we had 6 kids, and I was 7 months pregnant with number 7. And so they were 4 years younger than they are now. Our youngest, probably 3, didn't really have any idea what was really going on. Our oldest was 12 at the time. So the older 3 comprehended the fact. When I told them, I explained to them that they all knew that Dad's hands were changing and growing weak. And so I explained to them that he had gone to the doctor and we had found out that he had a disease and that it was called ALS. And I explained to them that his hands would continue to get weak, but so would all the other parts of his body. So his legs would grow weak and his voice and all of those other things. And that he would eventually die because his body would continue to grow weak. So I said, you see how Dad's hands, they were kind of starting to, they didn't look right. They were starting to look a little different. And I said, do you see how Dad's hands are a little bit different? I said, all of Dad's body is going to get different. And because it starts to get weak, it will eventually die. So I said, we do not know how long Dad will live. We do not know exactly what will happen, but we do know that ultimately this will cause Dad to die. And that was hard for my older ones because they comprehended death. But at the same time, I feel like there was a very calm peace in our home because even though we knew Dad was going to die, they woke up the next morning and he was still there. So it was like, okay, he's going to die, but he's still eating breakfast with me today. And the next morning, he was still there eating breakfast, So it was like, yes, there was changes, but in our situation, for us, ALS is a continual decline, but it's been steady enough that like we've been able to digest in palatable portions.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was that initial shock, but even then after the shock, it was like, oh, but he's still here, but as he has continued to lose function, obviously there's grieving definitely that occurs for all of them.
Mm-hmm. So when you initially talked about it, you gave them very factual information and gave pretty much all of the information.
100%, yeah. From the very beginning, they knew that ALS would cause Dad's body to change. He was going to need help and that he would die. Like that was 100% open, clear, and we've talked about it from day one. But the other thing is we also, from their birth, have explained to them that death is a natural progression and we truly believe in the power of a resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I think, a very natural transition because we understood that Dad would die, that he would be resurrected.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of their amazing faith, like for them, they talk all the time about death and resurrection and being healed and being made whole. And it's very normal to them and very much a progression through life. So it's not as scary because it's something we've talked about their whole life. It wasn't something that was new to them. It's just
so your faith was very comforting too, in being able to explain what was happening and what they could expect. Were there any other books or any other tools that you used early on or throughout that were helpful?
There was, let's see. So I started trying to find movies or find pictures of people that looked like what Dad may look like. So I I was on Netflix, or Jonathan was on Netflix, and we just typed in, I think, Lou Gehrig, and we found a movie called Quiet Victory, which is the story of Charlie, I don't remember his name, I could look that for you, I don't remember, Warlenmonger, I feel terrible, I can't say, anyway. It's the story of a high school football coach who's diagnosed with ALS, who continues to coach football even though he has ALS. But it was a family-friendly movie that goes through the progression. It watches him lose the ability to use his hands. He loses the ability to walk. They could very, very clearly see their dad going through this. There's some emotional parts of that that are kind of hard to watch, but I felt like it was a good movie that I felt fine for all of my children, all ages viewing, that also was uplifting, that made me help them see that even though our bodies change and even though dad will be different, he'll still be your dad, you know? So for us, I really liked that movie early on. And then connecting with people with ALS. So through the ALS Association, we had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and be with a lot of people with the disease. This is the first time I've seen someone on a ventilator, and I was like, you know, or a feeding tube, someone shows their feeding tube. I'm thinking, who shows someone their feeding tube? And now I'm like, do you want to see his feeding tube? So, I wouldn't say that there were necessarily books, but I did use exposure from every avenue I could find. Visited families with ALS, so they saw a friend of ours who was in a bed, you know, attached to tubes. So they came to familiarize themselves with the idea that there's going to be hardware involved with this disease. And we tried to just simply expose them to it and have them see everything they could. And some of it's scary because I was scared by some of it too. And so honest and
so really normalizing it for everyone in the family. Yeah. How much did you, as you were going, you were also in this journey of accepting and not knowing what was to come and learning yourself. And how much did you share with the kids about how you were feeling about, and how much did you protect them from that?
I go in waves. I feel like for the first few years, probably 3 years, it was easy. Like, because Jonathan really didn't have a tremendous amount of decline. But then I think as his care became more extensive, I could find myself as the caregiver wearing down more. I was becoming fatigued and tired, which is when you realize you have to get help, which we absolutely have help at this point. But I have been very open with my kids. I have said to them, you know, I cry a lot. I talk to them about, I go for a walk in the mornings, and I usually walk and cry each morning. And I leave one of the kids in charge of dad. But they know that mom's going to go and vent, and it is okay to not be okay. I have explained that to my children over and over and over again, that it is perfectly fine to not be well and to be super sad and to be angry, because I have been super sad. I have been angry, and I have let them see all of those things. And I have been completely open and honest with them, seeing me be broken 100%, because I want them to be okay being broken. But I've also recognized the powerful tone that a mother sets in a home. So I also help them recognize that you can break, but you can also rise up and you can keep going. And you don't have to be broken. You can go for a walk and you can cry and say, this is hard and I don't like it. And then you can decide to walk in the door and do the day. And so I want them to understand that we all have the power to choose. And sometimes it's heavy, but it is okay to be okay too. It's totally real and raw, but I feel like we're always trying to stay in the light. You know what I mean? Like, yes, there are moments dark. Yes, my kids have been sad and angry and hurt, all of those things. But at our house, we do it all. Not perfectly, but it's ugly.
And you've really been modeling that. It sounds like that you can have those moments. They can see that there's times when it's really hard for you, and like those walks that you're talking about.
I call my church leaders and cry, or say, I'm struggling with this. What do? I'm having a hard time. This is a really hard point of grief. I talk to friends. I contact other people who have had ALS. That has been a huge support. It's connecting with other wives and being able to say, hey, did you have gray days where you just felt like you were so numb you couldn't breathe? And she's like, numb is the word I would completely describe this, you know. So it was nice to be able to just connect to wives. And anyway.
Absolutely. So Jonathan, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I wanted to know if you could share how you've maintained your connection with your children as your disease has progressed. I know you've already shared a bit of that, Amber, but and do you have any suggestions for other parents in your situation living with ALS?
Hopefully you can hear him.
I guess the thing I have tried to do is to remain engaged. Before the pandemic, I continued to attend the kids' school events and sporting events. We go to the park and take walks around our neighborhood. I race with them in my wheelchair and let them sit on my lap for rides. We watch movies together, and the little ones like to climb up on my lap for a movie on my computer. Create memories and stay engaged for as long as you can.
Thank you.
Could you hear him?
I did. Do you want to summarize just for people who maybe are not used to a computerized voice?
So basically what he said is he tries to remain engaged. He tries to go anytime the kids have an event. Jonathan has really felt like it's important to stay portable. And so we've tried really hard to maintain his ability to go. And we've been blessed to be able to have a vehicle that can transport a wheelchair. We've been blessed to be able to have a wheelchair. We've been blessed to have a ventilator that we can, you know, have the to-go menu. So he very much makes an effort to be where the kids are. He goes to the park with them and he races them around the park. The kids will ride their bikes. My daughter puts on her roller skates and holds onto the back of his chair, and he motors and she rides, you know, hitches a ride from dad. My 5-year-old finally can beat dad on his little tricycle, and he thinks because he's been trying to be faster than the wheelchair for 2 years now, and he finally can beat dad. Yeah, this is a big deal. The kids climb up, they climb underneath, you can see this, they climb underneath this screen right here and climb up onto his lap and sit on his lap, and then they use his screen to watch movies together all the time. He very much tries, anytime they're having anything going on pre-coronavirus, COVID, he was there. He tried to keep going. And something that I love is several years ago, early on, we did voice banking. So I feel like creating a synthetic voice that sounds like their dad is very intimately rewarding for all of us. Because even though he says it in a computerized voice, it still sounds like their dad. And so I love that they can still hear his voice, and that he can have organic conversations with them that even though they're synthetic, you can very much still hear dad there.
Wonderful point. And for our listeners that may not be familiar with voice banking, you spent many hours, Jonathan, before you lost your speech or it started to become more difficult, banking your voice, the sounds of your voice in order to create a synthetic voice, correct? Is there anything else that, and so that voice that we just heard is a interpretation of your actual speaking voice.
Correct. Which is really fun because he still says, I love you, Anna Bears, you know, and it knows that dad is still saying, I love you, Anna Bears. You know, it's just really sweet.
We have a question from our listeners. How do your children educate their peers and teachers about their dad and ALS?
This has been super fun for us, like ridiculously fun. Our school has been over the top amazing. They have invited Jonathan to the students' classrooms and done special like educational moments on ALS. So something that has been really fun is a lot of the teachers will talk about like technology and improvements, and Jonathan has gone into their classrooms and he has showed them eye gaze technology and how he types with his eyes and he talks to them. He talks to them about what ALS is and the fact that, you know, our baby is stronger than he is. But then we took in our Toby, which is not this one, but his other speech generating device, and let all the kids trial, you know, having eye gaze. So they would come up and try to see if they could get their eyes to track on it. And so Jonathan has done a lot of work in the schools, educating children and inspiring them to find problems to solve and to be creative and to be ingenuitive. And the fact that the person that created eye gaze technology was once a 3 or third grader in a classroom trying to cursive, you know, but there's something inside of them that says, hey, I can, you know, do something to help change this world. And so Jonathan really encourages the kids to be educated. We're really open. Kids come to our house. Just this week, we had a new kid come to our house. I was tube feeding Jonathan, and this girl walked up and kind of, you know, you see the eyes like this going, what is that? You know, so I just said, come here, do you want to see this tube? You know, so I bring him over here. Jonathan is like the expo center, bless his heart. So I'm like, look, this is really cool. There's actually a hole in his tummy, and I can take this food and I can put it inside of his tummy in this spot. You use the spot right here, but he uses this hole. Isn't that awesome? Do you want to see this hole? You know, and so like, we're really, really open with their peers, like seeing everything. Poor Jonathan, it has been really good to be willing to just, like, it is scary and new, but after they kind of digest it that first time, now it's totally commonplace. And they're totally comfortable with it. But he does a
That was
lot.
one of my questions is having your from 3 to 16, how do your kids feel about having friends over? And it sounds like
it is
been a
0 on the big deal scale. 0. It is so normal and natural to have extra people in our home that I don't think anyone has ever even thought it would be weird to have them there.
awesome.
For us, that may not be other people, but there has never been a moment that it was like, oh, what if they see my dad? Or because it's so normal to us and it's so natural. And Jonathan goes everywhere in public and with people all of the time that it's very super, super normal. Watch us suction him. They watch us. I mean, it's to feed him, all of load him out of, you know, normal.
And Jonathan, you've been going to the schools and been at their sporting events and all of those things for years. So your community really has been along, probably.
Yeah. I would say our schools, our elementary school in particular, because when you have 7 kids, you kind of become part of the school family.
Right.
Our elementary school has bent over backwards to love our family, to accept our family, and to support our family, and have been very open. I cannot speak enough good of schools to make our family feel normal and accepted. They have been amazing and loved.
That's so great. That's so good to hear. You already spoke to this a little bit about how your kids are handling everything emotionally, especially in the beginning. And I know that the trach for you, Jonathan, is new in the last month, right? 2 months. So how's everybody handling those changes? And
Good question.
You have teenagers now. Anything to share?
Let's see. So I think it's just normal. I think at first they were scared that he would never talk again, because before the trach, he was able to still communicate and you could kind of understand him verbally, but it was getting really, really hard. So they knew that once the trach was in, he would no longer talk. So I think for a minute that was scary to them, but then after he came home, I think it took a day and they were like, huh, okay. You know, but he had been using his eye gaze, so they were used to a hybrid model, I guess, of dad kind of talk with his mouth, kind of talk with his eyes, and now we've just transitioned to all eyes. The older boys are really good to help care for him. It is fascinating because some of my kids have more of an aversion to the trach than others, meaning I would say my older boys, like one is all over it, and he loves learning how to manage every part of it, and he wants to know how everything works. That's just his personality. And then I have another one who will do it, but he's like, it's not my favorite thing, like I don't want to do this for a living, but I'm happy to sit with dad and suction him, but I don't want to like go the extra mile to understand it all, which is totally personalities are completely different. And my third son, has watched for a month and then finally was like, I think I could do that. Like he wanted in on the action. So I taught him how to do the suctioning, and, he was just kind of the quiet bystander, but is feeling like that's something I can do. So I think the first month, Jonathan felt horrible. The recovery for the trach was awful. So I think my kids didn't know how to show him affection, because like they didn't want to touch him, because if you stimulated it, then he'd start coughing, and they could tell he was not feeling well. So it was kind of like they didn't know how to approach him, but let him heal. But I feel like now that he's kind of gotten through some of that healing phase, it's much easier for them to interact with him. But it was a transition, absolutely. And it was kind of this, they just stared at him when we walked in the door when he got the trach, and kind of wondered why, everyone just kind of gets the gross, like, that's it, huh? And you take that first day, but I would say within a day, the gross had worn off, and it just was like, oh, dad still doesn't feel good. I guess we won't jump on top of him,
Mm-hmm. And so now being post or 2 months in, and how is that? Are you back to them feeling comfortable climbing up on your lap and watching movies and doing all of that, or are you back there?
I feel like they are totally comfortable with him, but they interact with him a little bit differently because we have to be careful. We do have something that is an irritation. So like the little 3-year-old used to sit on his lap every single day and watch movies, and now she pulls her stool up right like this. So she doesn't sit on his lap, but she's still, let's watch movies, Dad, as close as she can get without bumping the trach. So they just adapt.
She's found a way to connect.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
So we have another question from one of our listeners. I know you have a large family, so it is all hands on deck to help the family work. Do you think the older children have had to take on more adult responsibility? How do you handle this? Do you talk with them about this?
Yes, 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 and yes. So all hands on deck is actually the exact phrase that I use. I say it very frequently. My oldest child became a father very fast. And that was really hard for me initially, because I'm like, it's not fair that he has to be the dad. But God sent him that way, and he is okay with that. And he is a nurturer. He is an organizer. He is a facilitator. God knew what he was doing 100%. My second son is an engineer. He's very mechanically inclined. He fixes the dishwasher. He fixes the car. He fixes broken lights. Like anything that needs fixing, he does it. My children have absolutely had to change how they live their lives. Bar none, 100%, yes. So everyone, and we have gone through different phases. We went through a phase where each of my kids took a night to cook, where I taught the oldest 4 how to make things. And so, we definitely had to organize our family so that everyone has had responsibilities. All of them have had to recognize that they have to help. And it's not a, do I feel like helping? It's a, you have to help even if you don't feel like helping, because there's just more to do than we can.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so yes, my older children have had to grow up fast. Yes, they have had a tremendous amount of responsibility. But I don't feel like they're bitter about that. I think it kind of brings them joy knowing that there are things that they can do to help. Just in the last, since the trach, we've hired more caregiving. And one of the caregivers is a nephew of mine. He's 23. And it's been neat for me to watch him come in and kind of lift the load of my oldest son, who is 16. And see him like, oh my goodness, there's someone else here that can help, that can thrive, you know, like just all of these wonderful things. So, I mean, it is what it is. There's never going to be perfect and ideal. That's just real life. It doesn't matter who you are. Ideal doesn't exist. But the reality is there is absolute power in family. There is absolute power in being united. We are blessed. Our kids have to do a lot. They assist with caregiving a lot. When I go on walks in the morning, one of the big boys has to be there with Dad. When Jonathan didn't have the trach, he did more walking, and my oldest son has picked his dad up off the floor probably 20 times. I have woken up, my oldest son left for school one time at 6 in the morning, and all I had left was the littles. So I woke up the next 5 and I said, I need help getting Dad off of the floor. And so I had some of them holding his feet to station him. I had 3 of them back here with me lifting him, and some of them, you know, pulling here. And so the reality is it takes all of us. And they have been woken up in the wee hours of the morning and asked to come and help. And it's just the nature of the disease. But that's the beautiful thing, Peyton, is it changes you and it makes you so much better than you ever thought you could be. It's such a gift. Every time you turn around, you recognize that it is such a blessing. It changes you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Jonathan's also saying, this is really true too. He says, we also try to give them opportunities to be with friends and just play. It's important to have downtime when they don't have any responsibility. And I would say that is 100% true also.
Mm-hmm.
Times when I don't expect them to do it all, and I don't expect them to clean up everything. Our house is not perfect, you know, our lives are not perfect, but I say to them, no, don't, you know, if they don't practice the piano, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Go outside and chase the ice cream truck. So I have definitely, like, if you lower your expectations, you find yourself very happy, right? Like,
Right.
I'll go to bed every morning. Sometimes all I do is count to 7 and realize there's 7 of them still there and feel like we did something that day. You know, like, it's not, we're not perfect. But it's the journey that is joy, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you share the story of your 3-year-old knowing when Jonathan needs to be suctioned?
Yeah. So it's been really sweet. So my youngest daughter, who is 3, is never known Dad without ALS. And she spends all day every day with him. You know, she doesn't go to school, so she's very, very aware of his needs. But since he has gotten the ventilator, he needs suctioning regularly. But she now can just hear it. Like, her ear has been trained to, like, hear the rasp or the rattle that starts to build. And she'll say, Mom, suction! You know, Dad needs suction! And so she'll run and find me. But I can be in a completely different room and I have this little suction alarm because she's playing in the same room and she can hear that and she comes and tells me, you know, Mom, Dad needs suction. But it's just like, no one has ever asked her. No one has ever trained her. She has just been like, hey, I know that sound. That's a suction need sound. And so she runs and finds anyone that can fix that to fix it. But it's great. You know, that's just her. She is so aware, so completely aware. But it's like that with my 5-year-old. Oftentimes, like, Jonathan's hands he can't open his hands. And so he could see that, like, his dad was struggling to try to lift, and he would run over and jump and he would reposition his hand. No one has ever asked him. Jonathan would say nothing, but he was so perceptive to, like, Dad's having a hard time. Why is Dad having a hard time? Oh, his hand looks curled. Let's open it. You know, he's 5 and I've never said anything to him, but that's just innate.
Mm-hmm. Wow, we could talk for 2 hours, I think. Thank you so much for sharing all these stories and giving us insights into your life. So touched. And I just love hearing about your family. And I'm sure our listeners have too. And so I want to give you a chance to share. One, you have already given us so much wisdom about just how you get through your day and what your family is like. But do you have anything that you want to share with other families? Maybe, brand newly diagnosed with ALS, right? Just starting this journey.
Okay, I think Jonathan might have, here he goes.
Okay.
Oh, maybe, hang on.
I think for any family living with ALS, my advice would be to be open and honest, whether your children know about the changes you are experiencing, and let them help with caregiving. I think kids understand a lot, and the more they understand and are involved with the whole process, the better off they are emotionally.
Did you understand him, Peyton?
I think I got most of it. Can you summarize it really quick for us?
Well, he just said his advice would be to be open and honest with your children. And he said, let them know about changes you are experiencing and allow them to be part of the caregiving process, because the more involved they are with the entire process, the better off they are emotionally. They feel
Wonderful.
they feel like they're part of it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jonathan. And on that note, I think we're going to end, and I want to invite our listeners to check out our website to see the other family events that we have going on this week. And if we didn't get to any of your questions, we will follow up with you privately later. So don't worry, we will get back to you, and don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you for being here with us today. Thank you, Amber and Jonathan, for joining us and sharing your family with us today.